Here's Jessica.
Well, hi, you guys. So tonight I wanted to talk about intimacy with the Father. And it was kind of fun how this subject came about. So I'll kind of share the unraveling of that. But one of the things that led into it is I love the little, like, on tea bags when they have, like, the little quotes that are on the thing. And so there was this quote, and me and Jason were talking about some of these quotes that we had in these tea bags. And one of them said, "Life is not a puzzle to solve, but a journey to indulge in." And you might be wondering where that even leads into intimacy, but it was interesting because just kind of how the pieces came together. But the conversation first started where it's like, yeah, like I know a lot of people that are afraid about how, like, they feel like they're going to get things wrong in life. They feel like life is a very particular path that they have to walk. And they're so afraid to take the next step until they have assurance from the Lord that that's exactly what they're supposed to do. And in that, they miss like the enjoyment in life. They miss the journey aspect of life, just the living and enjoying that with the Lord. Rather, it's, oh man, I hope I didn't screw up, or constantly doubting themselves or doubting if they even heard the Lord right if something goes wrong. And I used to, operate in a way that was like that. And I was always worried, like, what if I screw something up so bad that the Lord can't even fix it? The problem with thinking that way, though, is you're actually putting, like, you're removing the power that the Lord has, and you're saying that you have more power than He does. Because I can screw up this life so bad that you can't even fix it. Not like that. That shows that there's something about our thinking that we have off. And it's a very common, I have some friends that I deal with that as well, like just trying to reassure them it's okay. If this is the direction that you feel like you need to be taking and He hasn't said otherwise, it's okay. It's okay to step out and just stay in constant conversation with Him and relationship with Him. Romans 8:28, we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. So that particular verse just shows me right there. It's like you cannot screw it up so bad that He can't fix it. And then there's the verse in Matthew, which is 7:9-10. Which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a snake? And just the idea, like, do we think of Him as like this distant creator with all this power, but He's too holy to approach? Or do we think of Him as a loving Father, and we're His children? If we're asking for guidance, if we're asking for something, He's going to give it to us. He's going to be right there with us. He's not going to scare us into, wow, you didn't pause and ask me enough or listen enough, or you got that wrong. Yeah, you thought that was me, but that was wrong. That's not how He operates. So do we really understand His goodness and that He is our loving Father? I feel like there's this deep ingrained hindrance that we tend to have as His children, that it's in our mind. It's like this artificial barrier, and it causes us to withdraw or recoil from intimacy with Him. Like this fear that if we go too deep into intimacy, well, maybe that's not okay. I've even heard people say, refer to things along those lines, like different parts of my journey that I've taken with the Lord. I've had people approach me with this fear, like, yeah, I don't know, that seems a little out there, like, but I like the fruit of it. The fruit of it is like, it's this incredible intimacy, but it just seems really out there. And I just have to wonder, because isn't that what the fruit should be? The fruit should be this intimacy. But people will recoil from the place of, they like what they're comfortable with. They like certain laws and regulations, ideas. His holiness is unapproachable. It keeps them in this place that's safe. And yet there's an intimacy, like a barrier where they can't get past that. Yet they want more, but they're afraid that certain things are too deep. And so I just, like, contemplating this, it was really interesting. So then when Larry asked me what I would like to talk about, and he didn't ask me to like say it right then and there, but it got me thinking, and right in that moment I was back in the prayer room with him, and there was this plaque that he has on the wall that I really enjoy. It said, it's from Song of Solomon, "I have found the one whom my soul loves." So my eyes were drawn to that immediately. And I was like, "Oh, no, Lord. That's not the subject that we're going to go into, okay? Like, Song of Solomon, no, I'm not gonna even touch that. That's just awkward. It brings up awkwardness." And so for a whole week, I kept asking him, "So what are we going to talk about?" And he kept bringing that up. And it was amazing, like what he said when I finally just sat down with him. I'm like, "Okay, you keep bringing this up. What is it about this? Do you want me to go into Song of Solomon? Like, what do you, like, in the relationship of your intimacy with the church, with your bride?" And then I kind of started realizing, yeah, I think you do. You want me to go into the subject of intimacy. And what he said to me is, "Why are you ashamed of intimacy? Why are my children afraid of intimacy? Why is my bride afraid of intimacy? Do you even know what it is? You've made it a shadow of the truth. You have buried it in shame and fear. But intimacy is what you were made for. It is what I am all about. You were created for intimacy with me. You are my beloved. I am yours, and you are mine." And I realized, okay, this is where he wants me to go into, because there is this shame on the topic that I felt even, and it's like, yeah, there's something wrong with that. Like, so I wanted to dive into, what is this hindrance? So the first thing is, what is intimacy? We get this idea that it's, like, the first thought that usually comes to most people's mind is it has to do with a romantic relationship. A lot of times they bring in, like, a physical aspect of it. And I realize, you know what? That's a very, very small part of it. I can have intimacy with my child. This isn't just a romantic relationship. There's an intimacy you can have with your Heavenly Father. And they're all different. They're unique in their own way, but the actual word intimacy, what it really is something that you can have with anybody, with any relationship. And it's something that's so much more than just the physical. If it was just the physical aspect, we're completely missing the point. It is the 3-in-1. It is the aspects of us as spirit, as our physical being, and as our emotional aspects as well. And so a very simple way that somebody once put it, which I was then led to realize, this wasn't this person that made it up. I guess it's a common phrase, but I had just heard it from that person, is intimacy means into me you see. And it just strips it down to a very simple, like, this vulnerability. So it's an experience of being fully understood, accepted, and cherished. Not just physically or emotionally, but a spiritual connection. It's the vulnerability of laying bare one's soul to expose every flaw, every fear, and every hope. And so it requires a deep, deep trusting of the person that you're intimate with. And so going back to with the Father, like that idea of why we're afraid to take the wrong step in life's course and things like that. Well, there's a deep mistrust that's ingrained in that with the Father. So of course there's going to be a recoiling from intimacy. So maybe it's a misunderstanding of his nature. There's something that is off there in that we would not trust him fully, that we would recoil from intimacy with him. And I think an aspect of that is we're afraid that he's going to condemn us. But he is a boundless love. And that's where we miss that. He is love. He is not judgment. We completely misunderstand that when we're afraid that if we approach him, he's going to see a flaw in us and immediately point to that and condemn it. And try to correct things. No, instead, he is just boundless, limitless love. And when we don't understand that, of course we're not going to be able to trust him and to be truly intimate. And then there's shame and fear. And these two are really interesting and just how they are the antithesis of intimacy. So fear and shame have to be removed in order to be able to approach him with a childlike faith and openness. And as I was thinking about that, I'm like, yeah, children, they know intimacy. They immediately come into this world. That's what it's all about. They are fully open. They're fully capable of looking at somebody else and just calling out whatever they see in that person. They're very intimate. And so he asks us to be like children, that childlike faith, that childlike openness, that vulnerability. But somewhere along the way, children learn fear and shame. And we start to hide behind laws and regulations to protect us. We build up these walls around our heart, and we hide in that place, and we forget how to be intimate. So what does intimacy produce? Well, it produces rest and assurance. And those are definitely words you hear in the Bible a lot, like, come into my place of rest. He wants to give us this assurance. Intimacy also reveals your true identity. You're able to discover your true identity and see yourself and your life and others through his eyes. We're able to live authentically and to love others selflessly and to walk confidently in our purpose. So these are all things that are the fruit of intimacy. And I don't think you can get these things without intimacy with the Father. I think we might be able to fake them for a period of time, but there's going to be something that, it's just, you can't know yourself until you allow him to see into you and you see into him, and then your true self is revealed. So what's this barrier that stops us? So the main hindrance is fear and shame. And this fear can stem from unworthiness, which is a lot of it comes from a misunderstanding of God's nature. As I mentioned, misunderstanding of as condemnation, as not recognizing his unconditional love. To say that he is love, I remember growing up in the church, hearing that phrase, but it was said so often that it just kind of went over my head to really understand, no, wait a second. Unconditional love. I kept thinking of love as conditional, and that is not love. And it's almost redundant to even say unconditional love because the aspect of love has no condition in it. But we have this misunderstanding of his nature that we need to reteach ourselves. And he's the one that can show us that. But it does require being vulnerable in this place of intimacy. Later on, I'll kind of mention some ways to get started with it because it can be a challenge if you really put those walls up. But so as I'm thinking about these barriers that we have, the Israelites came to mind. And so in Exodus 20, 18 to 21, there's this passage that literally is titled, "The People Afraid of God's Presence." And it just, wow, man, I was, I'll read it here in a second, but it was like, from the very beginning, he has been calling out to his people to be intimate with him. And we've just recoiled. So it says in Exodus 20, 18 to 21, "Now all the people witnessed the thundering, the lightning flashes, the sound of the trumpet, and the mountain smoking. And when they saw it, they trembled and stood afar off. Then they said to Moses, 'You speak with us, and we will hear. But let not God speak with us, lest we die.' And Moses said to the people, 'Do not fear, for God has come to test you, and that his fear may be before you, so that you may not sin.' So the people stood afar off, but Moses drew near the thick darkness where God was. And man, I wonder what the Father felt in that moment. Like, and thank goodness, like Moses drew near, but that had to have hurt. They were so afraid of him. They didn't even know how to have an intimate relationship with him. They didn't even want to have an intimate relationship with him. There was such a misunderstanding. And that misunderstanding went on for a long, long, long time. And that's why Jesus came into the world, to reveal the Father to the Israelites, to his children, to the world, that, hey, my Father is not like that. This is who my Father is. So, yeah, this fear that stems out of a place of, they're afraid that if they approached the Father, approached God, that he would see unworthiness in them, that his holiness was too great to approach, that they would be rejected. And I'm reminded something that was mentioned here, actually. Terry brought this up, and it's like, oh, man, that's so right. The spirit of the Antichrist is unworthiness. It's because we're rejecting who is within us already. He is in us. And if we reject our worth and our value, we're rejecting who he is in us. And so there's an aspect of it's the spirit of the Antichrist that you're embracing in that. And so it's a really big thing to think that this unworthiness that we have within us, we're rejecting him who is in you and calls you beloved. We're too afraid of what we will see in ourselves if we go too deep. It's a common theme you actually see in some movies, and I found that intriguing too. I was like, wow, this really is interesting. We are so terrified of revealing who we are deep, deep inside to ourselves and to others, that we won't even go there. I don't even think we will allow ourselves to go there. There's something that stops us. Like, no, that's too far. I feel uncomfortable. I don't want to get intimate with the Father because he's going to reveal to me who I really am inside. Well, you know what's really deep down inside of all of us, which is really fascinating? It's his glory. It's his glory that he put inside of us. That's what he said. And yet we're afraid of that. Is it because subconsciously we know that that's what's in there? I'm not sure. I mean, I find that really fascinating. But why is it that we are so afraid of what's deeply within us, and yet that is what is in every single one of us? So, taking that, I kind of wanted to go a little bit further into this shame and fear. I wanted to start with a story in which I was in a period of time where the Lord was breaking off the poverty mindset. And you don't know that you have it until you're starting to break it off. So it was very fascinating. But as I was going through it, and he's just bringing these ideas of just different ways of going into making money and just breaking out of this place that I was at where I just thought this is just how life is. Suddenly I realized I felt really uncomfortable. Like there's kind of a fear in it. And so the Lord asked me, what is that you're afraid of? My initial response would have been, I'm afraid of failure. I'm afraid that if I fail at this, I'm going to be disappointed. I'm going to have put a lot of work into this. But then that's not it. I'm not afraid of failure because I actually have this excitement. I'm like, I could try this. If that doesn't work, I could try this. I could do this. It's not failure. And then it hit me. I'm afraid of success. And when that hit me, I was like, oh my goodness. Oh wow. Like what is this? I don't understand. And I started kind of evaluating that and going in deeper with the Lord and that. And he goes, well, you're afraid of success because if you succeed, you're going to have to change everything. Everything about how you live, everything about how you manage money, everything about, so many things are going to change. And I was like, that's it. You're right. If I fail, well, okay, I know how to live like this. That's all right. But if I succeed, everything changes. So it was a really healthy process because you have to admit these things to yourself to be able to break them and get past that and actually get to the root of why you might not be motivated or what's stopping you from doing something. So in that, realizing that I was afraid of success made me realize, so coming into this subject with fear and shame hindering us from intimacy, there was this quote or this poem that I absolutely love. And I think this really hits into that so well. It's called Our Deepest Fear, and it's by Marianne Williamson. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking, so that others won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It is not just in some of us, it is in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we're liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. I absolutely love that poem. And I found it around that time that I realized I was afraid of success. And I bought a little plaque that I put up on my wall. And it's a reminder to me. It's like, wow, yeah, sometimes the things that you think you're afraid of are not really the things you think you're afraid of. But yeah, so taking this and going into fear of intimacy with God is actually tied to fear of our own potential and the magnitude of God's presence within us. Because then everything has to change. It comes with a responsibility that we have to live authentically as a child of God. And it's like, well, what does that even look like? That feels too big. I'm used to living like this. So if intimacy produces something like, no. That can come later, Lord, after you perfect me and I go to heaven. It puts it off where it's at a safe distance. So, and then it's like realizing that just like the Israelites, they were afraid of the overwhelming holiness of God on the mountain. Well, where does God say he resides now? He resides in us. So in just the same way as they were afraid of the overwhelming holiness on the mountain, we're afraid of the overwhelming potential and the holiness and God that is within us. We're afraid of what that means when that manifests. So accepting means stepping out of our comfort zone. It means breaking free from limitations that we set on ourselves and committing to a path that requires faith, courage, and vulnerability. Yeah, that stirs up fear. It means acknowledging that we are not only loved and accepted by God, but also called to be co-creators with him, bearing fruit and bringing light to the world. So by overcoming this fear and embracing intimacy with God, we're going to tap into a strength and a purpose that transcends our understanding. There's going to be a peace that comes with an empowerment that comes with it, but it does require that faith, that childlike openness, that vulnerability to step out into it. We're going to move beyond the superficial and step into a transformative relationship. Once again, it's all about relationship. We're empowered to fulfill our true potential and live out the abundant life that God has intended for us. So there's all these promises that come with it. And all it is but it comes with a vulnerability. It comes with a putting ourselves out there. It comes with that childlikeness. And that it's okay. It's okay to draw in close, because you know what? He's not going to condemn me. So how much of life's adventure are we missing if we don't dare to dive into intimacy? This was another one on a tea bag. It said, life is either a daring adventure or nothing. And that's a pretty stark contrast, but I was like, yeah, it is. We could live really safe, but man, we're missing a lot. Or we could step out and trust the Father. That the Father is going to be right there to catch us and take care of us. And He's going to show us things that are going to blow us away. So intimacy creates fruit. And it's the only thing that produces fruit and brings life. Living by laws and regulations, and He's too holy to approach, and He's at this place, and I'm always going to be here until one day, just poof, He does it all. Will leave us in a place where we can produce some fruit, but it's not going to stay. It's going to be a struggle. There's going to be a striving. There's going to be a feeling of lack. There's going to be unfamiliar. It's going to be fear motivated, and there's going to be shame. But intimacy brings the fruit of there's this rest, there's this assurance, there's this peace, it's okay, He's got it. Everywhere that I didn't quite do it right, He's got it. It's all right. And I'm just going to walk one step at a time in intimacy, face to face with Him, knowing that I am fully loved. And that automatically is going to bring fruit, and it's going to reveal to other people who they really are too. So intimacy is challenging. It changes the concept of reality. It's going to completely change your whole concept of reality. And I think a lot of you guys have already experienced that. But it's challenging. And it forces you to actually face fear constantly, because you'll constantly come up against it. But what happens that's different is the fear has no place to stick. Because outside of intimacy, fear becomes a living thing. But within intimacy, it's nothing. It's fake. It's within your mind. It has no place to land or stick. So it can come fluttering in, but it can be pushed out just as easily and never have a lasting effect. But this is not speaking from a place of shame or condemnation either, because we're learning it. We're walking it out. So it's not like okay, click. I understand intimacy. I'm walking in it, and I will never struggle with fear again. It will just be poof, a second, and then it's gone. It's a learning process. And you are going to face a lot of learning with walking through the fear as you're pressing into intimacy. But it gets easier and easier, and you realize more and more that it's just, you're fake. In this place of intimacy that I always have been, and now I'm recognizing it, you can't manifest or have the power that I thought you did. So fear actually becomes more of an indicator of something to push into. If there's something that's triggering fear, and you're reminding yourself that you are in that place of face-to-face encounter with the Lord, intimacy with the Lord, it's usually an indicator that maybe there's something within me. There's a hindrance that's being triggered within me that doesn't want to go there. Well, you know what? That's probably the place that you should go. But you shouldn't feel pressured to have to take it all on right then and there. And immediately you'll notice that fear kind of dissipates when you're like, okay, that's something that we need to address, isn't it, Lord? But you're not going to make me do it all at once. We're going to slowly conquer that together, and I'm not alone in this. And then shame. Shame is something that has oftentimes been used as a tool. It's like a correction tool, and shame is a destroyer. It reinforces that something within us is bad. It produces separation. It creates this idea that we're separate from God, that there's something within us that is bad. It's the opposite of intimacy. It's not what the Father says. The Father has never once said, when he created us, he said, you are very good. He didn't say, yeah, I could have done better. No. He said, you are very good. And he has always desired for us to know that, to know, like, yeah, I mean, shame, it is a destroyer. It produces this concept that we are separate from him. Where does that come in from? It's a lie. He never once said that. We came out of him. And Jesus was the one who showed us that, he erased that barrier, that separation. And we have always been with him and in him. He's never left us. Love never abandons. Love never fails. So there's nothing to be ashamed of if we really know who we are. And there is no shame in intimacy, because we are not afraid of sharing every aspect of who we really are. Now, this can be something to bring clarity to this. Some people might say, I do these things, I do this. Like, that's not who you really are. Like, when I'm talking about your true identity, who you really are, oftentimes it's somebody that we're not even fully aware of yet ourselves. It's who the Father sees us as. It is our true self, our true nature, the perfection that he's already created us to be. And to know that that is who we really are, to embrace that. The other aspects, those are lies. There's something that, it's like a garment that we wear, but it's not us. We can't identify ourselves by the clothes that we wear. We identify ourselves by who we really are, at the core of who we are. And God doesn't create bad things. So intimacy is looking inside of each other. One aspect about it that I find really fascinating is we can't really know our true selves until we have intimacy with the Father, because he's the one that looks into us, reveals that, pulls that out of us, speaks it over us. And we do that for each other too. So that's a huge importance, to have intimacy with each other. It's this concept that sometimes we're going to miss seeing who we really are, because it might be things that only somebody else can see within us, and they have to speak it out, call it out, for us to understand it and it to be revealed. So it helps us discover who we really are. And shame and fear keep us from discovering who we are. Intimacy lets others see our fullness and call it forth. It's the aspect of co-creating with the Lord. So how does it look when we don't even know how to begin with intimacy? Maybe we've been so hurt, we're scared. There's so much fear that's blocking us from it that we don't even know how to start. Well, there has to be an environment that's cultivated for it. And it's actually like cultivate the ability to love yourself. Start to recognize when there's self-hatred, when there's just recognize and speak love over yourself, and understand that, hey, the Father sees me this way. He created me. I am beautiful. I'm wonderful. I'm perfectly made. And this is who I really am. And start to cultivate an environment to be able to love yourself. And intimacy may just look like a vulnerability to opening up to receive his love as we learn how to have intimacy. It might just be just laying down, just letting him love us. That's where it starts. We love because he first loved us. And he loves when we just lay down and we just learn to receive and accept his words and his love. And intimacy will manifest out of that. And that might just be the place that it needs to start. So in conclusion, I just wanted to say that, we were created for intimacy. And it is where our true self is found. And I wanted to remind you guys of what the Father had said to me with this subject, where it's like, intimacy is what you were made for. It is what I am all about. You were created for intimacy with me. You are my beloved, and I am yours, and you are mine. Shame and fear can't reside in intimacy because they can't reside in a realization of the face-to-face intimate place that we've always been in with the Father. Separation is the lie. So I want to open it up for questions. Some things to get you guys thinking about questions is, what have you experienced with intimacy? What's been the fruit? What's been some barriers? And what are some stories? And I'd love to hear some stories that you have about the journey along the way with intimacy.
First of all, that was a super powerful message. So I just have a question. How do you know when you have reached that level of intimacy with the Lord?
That's actually a really cool question, because I asked him that, like, how deep is too deep? He goes, I'm eternal. Intimacy with me is eternal. Just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
So I have a little story. I'll probably cry. Not probably, I always do. But where's Meg when you need her? She needs to mist with me. Anyway, I had, no, I won't need that. It's nerves. Because I'm going to tell something intimate. So I was in worship one time, and I, disappeared. And I was somewhere else. And it was so amazing. And when I came back to myself, I was in a group of people, they were gone. The building was gone, everything was gone, except me and the Lord. And it was a very intimate time. And when I came back, and I realized, oh my God, that just happened in front of 400 people, And I was just like, okay, that's embarrassing. And that's what I said, it's embarrassing. And I posted that on Facebook. And I said, I had a weird experience last night. I literally disappeared out of a room full of people during worship and had the most amazing intimate time with the Lord. And when I came back, I was embarrassed. And people were like, why would you be embarrassed? Because I was with the Lord in intimacy and the things that we were sharing with each other, and him showing me and me showing myself to him. It was intimate. Embarrassment is not shame. And I think there's a big distinction in that, because sometimes intimacy is embarrassing. You were talking about being vulnerable. We had snap talks last week, and the two gals that gave their snap talks, they were very vulnerable. But they weren't ashamed. They were a little embarrassed, but they weren't ashamed. And so I just want to encourage you guys that embarrassment is not the same thing as shame. But I got such flack on Facebook, and I thought, well, that's really weird. And then I said, Lord, should I not be embarrassed? And this is what he said, and it's not a knock on anybody else. He said, they haven't gone there yet. And I went, well, surely everybody's intimate with you like that. He goes, no, sweet baby girl, no, they're not. And so, when you asked your question, go deeper. She's right. How high, how wide, how, the whole spectrum of that. Psalms 139, embrace it, go after it, and know that that is the fullness of what intimacy is. God knows us before we were in our mother's womb, and we can't go anywhere where he's not. And I just was so amazed by that. And I've had that experience over and over, sometimes by myself, sometimes in a small group, sometimes in a large group. But intimacy, you never know when it's going to overtake you. Because I'm just singing a song, and all of a sudden I was gone. And so You might be in prayer, and all of a sudden you're gone. You might fall asleep and wake up and realize, oh, the presence of God is in my room. What's up, Papa? And so, seek intimacy. I really don't know if we can actually stand to live in that 24/7, but we can definitely embrace it and have it be more and more a part of who we are, and who he wants to be in our lives. And so I just thought I would share that.
Thank you. I love that.
Intimacy for me has been in stages. When I first understood Christ as my Savior, it was awesome. I mean, it was this level of, wow, I've got this relationship with a divine being. And then it kind of faded for me, but then there was a truth that I learned, which brought me into a different, I don't know if it's called a level, but a different place for me with him. And of course, with Jesus. My whole thing was in my earlier life was all about Jesus with me. God was up there, Jesus within me, God's Father's over there, and I'm just kind of shying away from him. So there's these levels that I would go through. I would go to a conference, and then all of a sudden I'd be in this conference, and God would be moving on me in such a way and bring forth another truth. And it was this new level that I'd have of a relationship, intimacy. And it just continues to go that way. And then it seems like there's a lull, and it's like, wow, God, what's going on? It's like he's drawing me further to understand who he is and and who I am with him. And it just continues to flow that way. And then the one of the big climax was where I understood that God, Father, loves me and was in me, where that was a big, huge hurdle for me. I always thought he was going to bounce on me, so it was a thing of always trying to do the best I can. And then it was another big hurdle was religion, understanding that I don't have to do all this stuff because he loves me anyway. And it doesn't matter if I'm good, bad, doing right, doing wrong, he loves me. And that's just a big, huge hurdle that I had of coming into an intimacy place with him. And just knowing that the depth just goes deeper and deeper, and it's like just growing in him, I guess. I don't know. But it's for me, it's this renewing, you might say, of refreshing, and he just takes you. I've just think like he kind of I don't know the word. It's like he's drawing you into a deeper level, and it's like you're having to struggle to find out where that is, and then a truth happens. Or a relationship happens, or something else happens, and you go, wow, that's it, only to discover that there's something else. And he just continues to draw you and draw you and draw you as long as you're open and willing to do that. And as long as you're willing to go further and further, he's willing to take you as far as you want. So it's not really up to us how deep we want to go and how far we want to go with him. And when you discover certain things like praying over your heater and realizing he cares not only about me, but he cares about my environment. And the things you step out in, the things you think of, what should I be doing next, Lord? And all of a sudden he throws this real estate in your life and goes, I can do that? And you feel like, wow, maybe I can do that. And you try it and you go, wow, this brings me into another level of his grace and his prosperity. And so it just amazes me how we are so blinded in certain areas until he reveals himself in those areas so that we can enter into those areas and see that he's there too. And he's always been there, and he'll always be in that place. And it doesn't matter if you make a mistake because he's there too. And he brings you out of that. And he breaks you, and it takes you further and further and further. That's the intimacy I've discovered.
That is awesome. Yeah. It's just like his goodness. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I'm really glad you asked that question, by the way, because for me, I just started something like 3 or 4 months ago, and it was so simple. It just works for anybody. It doesn't matter where you are or what you have or don't have, because it has to be simple enough that it works for anybody all over the globe, whether they're sitting in the dirt with nothing or they're sitting on top of a high rise that they own. But it was this simple. I laid down in my bed one night and I just said, well, first I took a couple deep breaths, which is always a good place to start. And then after that, I just said, I am in you, you are in me, we are one. And I said that probably 5 or 6 times before all of a sudden God's presence just kind of flooded me. And it wasn't just me, it was like the room, because my daughter came in and she climbed up and she said, Daddy, what are you doing? I said, I'm hanging out with Jesus. And she goes, you feel happy. Like, she said, she told me how I was feeling. Like, she could tangibly feel God's presence, like just being next to me, engaging that. And it was so cool. Like, we just laid there. I don't even know how long. I think I laid there for like 2 hours. I think she was there for about 20 minutes. But the best part was, as soon as I entered into that, I didn't want to be anywhere else. I wasn't thinking about anything. I wasn't worried about anything. And it made me think of, I was just looking at this today, and it's just the beginning of Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. And I'm not even going to keep going. I'm just going to go back to the Lord is my shepherd. It's a really comforting thought to even feel like a sheep, because they're just dumb and smelly, and they're not worried about anything because they know there's a shepherd right there, and if they do anything dumb, he's just going to come over and rescue them, you know. And it's just, I just think about the Lord like that. Like, I'm not worried about making mistakes or just doing something dumb, because I know he's just going to come and rescue me if I do. And it takes the pressure off. But this whole thing of intimacy, I feel like there is this perceived distance between us and God, and that's all it is perceived. The truth is, there's no distance between you and him, no matter how you're feeling or what you're doing. It's just all in your head. But he's trying to get you out of your head and into your heart, because you don't need to go find anything. You just need to go in here and find him. All right, I'm be done.
That's awesome. Thank you.
It's a great topic, Jessica. Thanks for sharing and thought-provoking and reminiscing, and yeah, just thinking about the journey, how so much for me was shaped by the churches I went to and the teachers and the way they came across. And the nature of God is such a huge thing. And I was very, ignorant to the truth about his nature. You know, like Richard shared, it was me and Jesus, and I could be close to Jesus, but the Father was a whole different story. And I just feel like the the churches and the teachers that I was exposed to reinforced the message of holy God, distance, and performance. You know, it just keeps that outer layer going all the time of just behavior and how's your walk, and it was just all about the do's and don'ts, and creates just such a false separation and fear and wanting the approval of the leaders, and it's just all out here, you know. And it's just been such a breakthrough when the nature of God, Papa God, to me, has been revealed. And that chasm that I've had felt with him just because of lies got broken through, you know. And that just happens with those encounters where he gives you revelation, where he speaks sweet, intimate things that you don't even want to share with someone else because it's just so personal. You're just like, oh my God, you know. In my sweet time, he said I could call him Poppy, and that's what I call him personally. I don't really share that out here because it's just personal. It's just a him and me thing. But again, I credit so much the environment of Joyland these past 12, 13 years, and the things that Larry has helped foster and breaking through as a pastor and as a leader about the nature of God, that has just really helped build upon, that God is just better than you ever imagined, you know, and his mercy is just endless, and his grace and his goodness, and God has just been so faithful to just keep building on that foundation when I had such a faulty foundation, and it just always kept that distance. And all it was performing. And a sense of, I can't get close. And I can't really acknowledge my sin with him because I'm afraid, you know, like he didn't know that. So it's so stupid. But that's why the good news is just so important to be shared. We have such a great message about the loving Father, and I just feel like we can't talk about it enough because there's still barriers, there's still levels. I mean, I'm revisiting this fear that early on in my Christian life, but I still have remnants of it now with if I get so close, you might tell me to do something that I really am afraid to do. And then it was, you know, he's going to send me to Africa and be a missionary. And it's nothing I ever wanted to do. But that was what I was always afraid of. And so I was so hesitant to just be quiet with him because he might say that. And so I had this kind of, you know, keep my hands on my ears, like, wow, what a great lie, so that I can't get close to hear his voice because I'm afraid what he's going to say. And that's not fully gone. I'm being honest with you. There's still some parts of that need to get off of me and not be afraid of what he might tell me to do, because he'll give me the grace to do it. And voila, it's probably going to be something I'd want to do anyway, right? Because that's what a good father would do, not putting some heavy thing I hate or I couldn't do. But again, I just think religion has so corrupted the capacity for intimacy because of all of those lies and things that really just strangle us and just keep us at a distance. So really enjoyed what you shared, Jessica, and it makes me thankful for where the Lord has brought me, bringing all of us on the journey. And thankfully, we don't have to compare ourselves because we're all individuals with him in our own space and time. So thanks for bringing it up.
Thank you, Jen. That was wonderful what you shared. Yeah. I'm reminded too that verse, if you ask for bread, he's not going to give you a stone. And so as far as sending you off to Africa or something, no, he sees something that's in you that's so unique and special that you're going to enjoy doing it because it's who your true nature and identity is. And it's not going to be something that's going to be like pulling teeth. That's not his nature. But yeah, I love that. There's a lot of misunderstanding of his nature that we get to journey with discovering, and there's so much freedom. Yeah. And it makes you want to share it with everybody. His goodness.
This is good stuff. So, Zane and Landon, this is kind of what we do. It's like we don't preach. There's no preaching that goes on here. It's all family discussions. And everybody's at the table, so welcome to the table, man. Yeah. But I was thinking about being called to Africa. There was a period of time where I was like, okay, Father, if I get called to help out one of these 3 ministries, I will be obedient. But in my heart, I'm thinking, please don't call me to the one in Lagos, Nigeria. Because I don't really want to go to Africa. Ironically, one of them did turn into a church plant in Colorado Springs, and that was the Chicago one. So it worked out. But one of the, as you were going, Jessica, I was thinking a little bit about that journey, because when you started sharing your experience, I was thinking and it's hard to put your journey into a capsule, right? Because it's a little bit different. It's not a formula by any means. But it did I had to write it down. I was like, you know what? For me, it started out with knowledge of the Lord. And then that knowledge for me turned into a reverence. And it was during that period of reverence that I started journaling, because I was really hungry to hear the voice of God. I would hear people talking about it, and it was actually John Eldridge that really spurned me to, man, if I could be like that. I heard him telling a story when he was working at Focus of he was at work and he couldn't remember if he shut the gate to the horse stall. And at that point, you would rush home and you'd go check. But he checked himself. And he said, well, Holy Spirit, Father, Jesus, did I leave the gate open to the horse stall? And Holy Spirit said, no, you closed it. But at that point, he was still kind of checking himself too. Did he really believe what he felt that he heard? So he went home and he checked. He had shut the horse stall. And so I started pursuing things like that too. And so I was journaling and man, just to start out, it would start out as, and I was counseled to start it out this way, and it was just such a great introduction on hearing the voice of God. And Joe Barlow said, write, son, comma, and then whatever comes to you. You can go back and judge it later. And it was so cool because when I did that, one of the exercises was he would start giving me things about people that were important to me, like my grandmother and my father and my mom. And as part of that exercise, I would take it to them and I would say, hey, I'm just kind of practicing something and seeing how it is. And there was usually something in there that was revealing. In fact, I remember when I took it to my dad, he was blown away because he said, I didn't even remember that. Wow, son, that's pretty cool. Yeah, it was. It was really awesome. So, through journaling, that really helped me recognize, you probably have heard the voice of God resonating within you for a lot longer than you've given yourself credit for. And then that, from knowledge to reverence, then turned into experience for me. And then out of that experience, I started feeling more intimate with the Lord. That intimacy started to become more comfortable. And I think the journaling was a big part of that. And then maybe stepping out in some of those things that I was giving. But then from experience to intimacy. And then I think from intimacy, we're able to, as you spoke to and others have tonight, start to feel acceptance. Because once we enter into that intimacy, how else are we really going to feel? When we recognize that we're abiding in the vine, marinating, percolating in the vine, we are accepted and we start to feel accepted. And then out of that acceptance, I believe, ultimately, that's where we get wholeness. Now. Not in the sweet by and by, but it's available to us all now. And it's a great subject, and it's a great journey, and it never gets old. There's more and more layers. As I heard Richard talking about, as I heard Jen talking about, there are more and more layers. It never stops. It just gets more bodacious every step.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Jessica.
Yeah.
So,
Or sometimes daddy he wants something done and it's got to get done. I can recall a couple of times when daddy wanted me to do something and I told him no, not gonna do it. I can recall 3 times when I told him I wound up doing them, and the outcome was absolutely incredible. But like he told a friend of mine was going through something, his wife had just left him. I mean, we're in prison, his wife had just left him, took his son. The guy had been teaching Bible studies and doing stuff like that, and he was just in a funk. He was, and rightfully so, he would have to look up to see down. And so we were at a Bible study together, and daddy told me to tell him in these words, get back to work. And I told daddy, no, I am not telling him that. And daddy said, go tell him that. And, after a few minutes, I was crawling on the floor. We were down on the floor praying anyway. I crawled over to him as low as I could get to the floor. And I said, daddy said to get back to work. And I crawled away from him, and I thought I had just lost my best friend And I don't know if it was the next day or a couple of days later, we were sitting at another service and he plops down in the chair next to me and hugs me and says, "Man, I'm so glad you told me what you told me, blah, 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 blah." And he started teaching and he was back to his old self. And there was another instance where I was with another buddy out on the weight pile and he was saying, "Do you feel that?" And I said, "Feel what?" "Man, something's happening. Something's happening. We need to pray in tongues." And I thought to myself, we're on the weight pile. And you want to pray in tongues. But we started praying in tongues. And we prayed in tongues until we got the release to start praying in tongues. Nothing happened. And so we recreation ended and we went back in the cell house. Found out later that day that I don't know if it was the Sereños or the Nortes, but two Hispanic groups were going to have a gang fight on the weight pile. They were going to fight on the weight pile, and it never happened. So I think there are times when Daddy's going to ask us to do something that we're really not comfortable with and we don't want to do, and it's going to take a little Jonah persuasion. But once we get into that, once we walk in that wonderful obedience, and even as we're making the decision, okay, Daddy, I'm going to do it, that peace that passes understanding comes over us, and we go and we do it. And there was a part of me when I told my buddy that felt horrible about telling him that, but the other part of me knew that he needed to hear it, and Daddy had picked me to do it. So going to Africa, blah 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 blah, stuff like that. If Daddy puts that in you, don't say no to the stuff that feels uncomfortable. Argue with Daddy. Lord knows I did. He knows I did. But he's gonna get his way. You're gonna feel so empowered by that interaction with him, that moment that he interfered and intervened in somebody's life and just changed them, and like my buddy brought him out of that muck and that mire and just restored him.
Yeah, that's really good. Thank you, Dave. Yeah, I'm reminded where fear can be that indicator to push into something. Because if you're in that place of intimacy with the Lord, and He's the one that tells you, and it's fear that I was told by Him once to never let fear stop me from doing something that He asked. And every time that I've pushed, there have been a couple of things that have come up where it's like, oh, there's absolutely no way I can say yes to this. But immediately he'll remind me of that. And then I'm forced to say, okay, well, I guess I do have to say yes to this. And there's this peace. It does, a peace that comes over. And he's transformed certain aspects of myself and things that I didn't think I was capable of doing by those different areas that I didn't let fear control it. And I pushed through with the Lord. And yeah, it's amazing. He is always, his peace it will carry you through. It will transform you.
So I wanted to go back to the last time you taught, which was on intentionality. And something I'm noticing in everybody's kind of talking about it, for instance, you started journaling, you intentionally did that for the intimacy thing, and Eric intentionally got in bed and said what he said. And when we enter into worship, there's an intentionality to be closer to God. And I think it's interesting that when we decide that we want to, in that sense, go after God, even though we know He lives in us and we know we have access and everything, I think there's something in God that goes, ooh, this is going to be fun. And so maybe a first step towards intimacy is the intentionality towards it. And I guess, intimacy can be spontaneous too. I'm not saying that. But there is an aspect to the intentionality of, when you grab your kid's head and you just look at them and go, "You are my heart." Your kids are going to know that. They're not going to, they might go, "Oh, Mom," or whatever, get embarrassed or, roll their eyes or whatever. But it's your intentionality. And years from that day, they're going to remember when their mom took their head in their hands and the intentionality of looking eye to eye, nose to nose, and saying whatever we're saying. And I think it's kind of a hand-in-hand kind of thing, even though I do believe intimacy with the Lord can be spontaneous. But I also think that we have to have a certain intentionality about it because, like Jen and Richard were saying, there's times in our lives when really thoughtful, compassionate men, for the most part, are teaching us things about God that they think they know. And you have to kind of walk away from some of that to come into that intimacy. He's a holy God and you're a sinner. Well, it doesn't matter if you've repented. It doesn't matter if you've said the prayer. It doesn't matter, because they still teach that over and over and over again. And it's something that gets locked into your brain. Or me coming from Catholicism, you have to go to confession, and then whatever the priest tells you, you got to do it. And there's a breaking that has to take place in us, because I could go into the brain science of it and everything else, but I won't. But you have to have intentionality to break that stuff off. And like you were talking about the poverty thing for you, breaking that off, I had that experience in my life. And it is extremely intimate when you're breaking off things like that. It is extremely intentional on the Father's part towards us. And then when we step into our intentionality about being with him in that thing, it is amazing what he will do. He will bring that freedom. He will bring that love. He will bring that dynamic into our lives of, I have been with you from... Again, going back to Psalms 139, because you guys know that's my favorite scripture. Before you were in your mother's womb, I knew you. That he's not saying that nebulously. He's saying he knew us. And so I think that's just good, if you don't know how to be intimate with God, get intentional. Lay down in your bed. Write down son, and then write down whatever you want to do. If you want worship music, put the worship music on. But that might be a step to take, right? For us to just get intentional about being intimate with God, as opposed to maybe the spontaneous kind of thing, which we can experience, like we can be in a conference and have an intimate time with the Lord. We can be on a walk and pause, and suddenly there's God. But I just think maybe that could help somebody who doesn't know how to enter into intimacy, but to just get intentional about it and do it over and over and over again. And then to maybe take that step to believe that what you're writing, like Jason did, is true. That is coming from God. That's coming from the Father. So anyway, we are probably going to go into worship now, because I see the worship team.
Yeah, just going to add one thing. When I talked about earlier church life and being amidst teachers that there was no intimacy because all they did was produce fear, the Lord has been talking to me about that even now. And so I guess I want to remind you guys too, sometimes we're around people who are, they're at a different place in their journey, and they're in a different place in their view of God and his nature. And so look at the fruit of what it produces in you. Because there's sometimes you're around people and they say things from their understanding about the Father, and you leave that conversation and maybe you feel a little thing of like fear and just a yucky thing. Like, I just feel like we just need to pay attention to that, because that can just happen in our everyday life with people. And so you don't even have to go to a church like that anymore. It could just be with, you listen to a podcast or you listen to something else, and it has that overtone of something that's still religious or something that's still, God's going to get you kind of deal or something, or it's just fear producing. So I just feel like just a reminder to be discerning of the things that we take in and the things that we might need to just cast off. Because God's been speaking to me about this lately, because I listen to a lot of prophetic stuff, and they're not all perfect, but some are mixed in their view of God, and certainly their eschatology. That I can easily toss to the side. But if it's leaving me feeling fearful or something like that, and so he's showing me that about someone that I've listened to quite a bit, and it's been percolating in me. And so actually last night when I was in bed, I felt like he said, I don't want you listening to that person anymore, or listen to this piece, but not when they go into like their own thing. It's okay to listen maybe to the prophetic word, but once they go on their commentary that has a lot of baggage of religious stuff and fear-producing stuff, that's the part you need to listen to. So God will be faithful to do that, to help us in our just daily walk, because there's so much out there now with podcasts and social media and all this stuff, and people are in different places in their beliefs. And so I'm just letting you know, in his goodness, he might tell you that, just like he's been talking to me about it.
Amen.
Thanks again. That was awesome.
Thank you guys so much. I loved everything you guys shared.
Wait, I have one more question. Sorry. Is there a relationship between intimacy and comfortability and, let's say, despair? To give an example, as in David, how after that whole he killed a man or murdered a man and lusted for this woman, after that he went into Psalms and he poured his heart out to God, and what he was saying of Psalms was super intimate. Is there a relationship between intimacy and disparity and comfortability?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So are you asking, like, can we still be intimate but be like feeling despair, or feeling comfort? These different feelings that we feel emotionally, and still be intimate in it?
Yeah. So the best way I can put it is when Jesus, and I forgot which chapter, but he said it's hard for a rich man is like a camel going through an eye of a canal. I'm not sure. Sorry, I butchered it, but needle. Yeah, needle. And that's because they're comfortable where they're at, where they don't need Jesus. And the intentionality part, I really do believe. But how about when you're at a very, very low point of your life? Do you think intimacy can really boom and grow?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a really good comment to make. Yeah, absolutely. I totally think that there's a oftentimes, it's like Mercy can attest to this in her testimony she shared last week. When you're in this place where you can't rely on the other comforts, that you just get into this zone, this place where you're not really forced to have this relationship with him. You're in the zone, You're going through the mundane aspects of life. There's this comfort. And when those things fall away, it does. It forces you to have to turn to something else. And it can be oftentimes in that place of despair, you got nothing else to turn to. And I don't believe he's the one that caused the desperate situation or the despair, but he is such an amazing father that no, like when we get to that place where we got nothing else to turn to, he goes, I've been here all along. I'm ready to talk to you any moment that you want to talk to me. And I won't judge you for, like, he wasn't judging David for the things David was pouring out to him. And David felt safe to be able to talk to him about all these intimate, personal things that he probably didn't know who else to talk to at that point. And it also attests to the fact that he did have an intimate relationship with the Lord, that he could just pour this stuff out. But I think, yeah, in a place of desperation like that can be a place where we first realize, oh, wow, you didn't condemn me. I can trust you, and it can help to build that trust. I love that comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you.
One thing I wanted to say is God doesn't waste anything. So it doesn't matter what you're going through. It doesn't matter what your circumstances are. God doesn't waste anything. And he will take that and he will redeem it because he's the Redeemer. So whenever you're going through something or you're in despair or whatever, God is going to not waste that. He's not a wasteful God. And so, Scripture talks about catching our tears. But again, it's about relationship, and we have to be real in our relationships. And that's one of the things that's so great about Mercy, which was, I don't want to talk to you. And so you just got to be willing to do that and be that, and know that God doesn't waste anything that's going on in your life.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I was going to say something, but
Go ahead.
those were good answers.
Yeah.
No, I was going to say I find that being in despair.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody knows my story, in despair, that is sometimes the best place to be for intimacy. I'm not saying that you want to be in despair. That's not what I'm saying. But it is the place that I feel like you can grow the quickest sometimes in intimacy, is in the hard season, in the desperate time. And you could probably talk to anybody about this even after in this room. And we've all, probably just in the last year, almost all of us have had some circumstance like that we could easily talk about, for sure. So, okay. So we're hey, we're at the end of January, I almost said July. Woo, am I jumping ahead? And we get to have worship.
Yeah.
That's very exciting. For those of you that have not been here all month, I have been out and sick and all the fun things. And so this is our first one for the whole year.
2025, starting it off.
So feel free to move about the room. You can, if there's new people or newer people, you can dance. You can, flags are over there. There might be some over there. You can be in the back if you want. You can be in the front. Lots